Hi there. Welcome to the third in our series about the importance of planning for libraries.
And this is my colleague, Sue Hall. Just to introduce ourselves, Sue's the Director of Library Strategies and one of our principal consultants. Sue has much experience in consulting, particularly with planning and developing the rapid results planning process.
And this is my friend and colleague, Stu Wilson. Stu was our first principal consultant at Library Strategies. Prior to this, he was the former director of the Hennepin County Library Foundation, and he was the executive vice president here at the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. He's worked with libraries all across the country. Library Strategies is offering these webinars to libraries and library organizations across the country. This is part of what we've been doing in our consulting services for the last 12 years. Library Strategies has done more than planning, and we have worked with library clients in 33 states and Moldova, Romania, and are hoping to shoot for the 50 states within the next couple of years.
Library Strategies is the only consulting group based in a library organization, and we only work with libraries. So some of our core services are strategic planning, fundraising of all kinds, including feasibility studies and capital campaigns. We do a lot of work with friends and foundations and board development. We can also we have consultants are part of our group who can do executive search, advocacy training, facilities planning, almost anything that libraries need outside help with. We have someone in our group who can help provide those services.
So as I mentioned, this is a series focusing on the importance of planning. Our first webinar, which we urge you to go back and listen to, is on preparing to plan. And the second is on our rapid results planning process. And in this third webinar, we're going to be focusing on development planning. So this is where we look at how do you pay for the library's enhancement? How do you get that strategic planning that you're just completed? How do you begin to pay for moving your library into a new direction or in broadening its scope?
So the question is, why do you need a development plan? Development is fundraising, but it also has other aspects like advocacy and PR and marketing. So one reason may be that you need to pay for a strategic plan, or you're going into a capital campaign. Looking forward, development may be an area where you want to plan so that you can get to a future direction, whether that's a strategic planning process or a capital campaign. Preparing for the future is really one of the key aspects of a development plan. Ensuring and growing the public and private support of the library. Public libraries will always be dependent on public funds, but private funds are becoming more important, and having a strong partnership between the public and private is really part of a development planning process. And then, of course, libraries have friends and foundations. Many libraries have 2 or even more friends and foundations. And so coordinating the activities of the library and your private support organizations is really critical, and planning is a critical tool to enable your library to be successful in that area.
I want to just cite real quickly here, one of the very first rapid results planning processes we did in Bozeman, Montana. Bozeman had a very highly functional Friends organization and a foundation as well. So that process actually took place where we did rapid results planning with the library. We did a strategic plan, a development plan rather, with the foundation, and then we did a plan with the Friends organization. So they ended up having a very coordinated and collaborative plans in place to support the library. So everybody knew what their role was in supporting the library, and the library is supporting the community. So a development planning process is different than a strategic planning process in that it is pretty much an internal planning process. So one of the first things that you want to do is, in looking back to the process that we did in Bozeman, Montana, is identify who the planners are. You definitely want to have somebody from the library involved in development planning who can identify the library's needs. If you have a foundation, the foundation is certainly going to want its own development plan. And if you have a Friends organization as well, it's really very good to have all of those key players in the same room, or at least being liaison to each other's processes and making sure that each of the organizations that supports the library has a development plan. I think that one of the things you should consider is engaging a facilitator. there are not a whole lot of foundations and friends groups that know a lot about development planning. Development planning is really looking at providing comprehensive support to your library from public and private sources. And a facilitator, somebody who really knows the library funding and advocacy world, is really a very valuable component of a development planning process. It's generally built around doing a development planning retreat, usually a half-day retreat. Oftentimes, we do development planning processes, scheduling interviews with individuals from the library director to the people from the board of the foundation or the Friends or the library's board to get the lay of the land, find out what's currently being done and what's not being done, where the gaps are, and where there's opportunities for new planning activities, new fundraising activities, or advocacy. And then we bring the data from that information gathering and share it with the groups that we're working with so that they have an idea of what things look like right now and what their colleagues believe is important for the organization to be looking at. And then really critical to the start of the process is to have the library come to the table saying, this is what we need your help with. We either are really in a critical need for more public funding, so we have to ramp up an advocacy initiative or a public awareness initiative, or we really need help raising money for new technology, or we need to be preparing for a capital campaign. And this is the data, the input that we get from the library director.
I think just to follow up a little bit, I think it's really important to gather the basic information about what kind of development work you currently do. If you want to raise $1 million, but you're only raising $2,000 now, it's not going to happen next year. You need fundraising, development, PR, infrastructure, and you need to build on that. So you need to start with where you're at and where your community is at. And then I think also the library's needs, defining that. A broad-based development for the library, in most cases, is less successful than something that's focused, a focused need, a focused community need, services that need to be enhanced.
Yep. I think probably one of the most often, most frequent calls that we are getting is from either libraries or library foundations saying, we've got a foundation or we've got a friends group and it's stalled out. It's really not active, or it's only doing the same fundraiser year after year and not raising a lot of money. One of the real benefits of doing a development planning process is to get the people in the room, get them to discuss why they're stuck or stalled. A lot of the time we focus on board development. So it sort of jump starts the fundraising and advocacy activities of a library support organizations.
So framing the development plan, one of the first things to look at is, for your library, what does development mean? Of course, in most cases, it means fundraising, but advocacy, and by that we mean advocating for the public officials that provide your public dollars, and being fairly direct about that is also really an important part. It's easier to raise private dollars if your public support is strong. It's harder, actually, to raise private dollars if your public support is weak. And a critical part of any fundraising or advocacy effort is public awareness, PR, and marketing. And so in order to be successful in the realm of development is really looking at those resources and defining what your needs are locally and what is possible. In some cases, it may be all three. In other cases, it may be focused in one or two of those areas. I think it's also, do you have a comment?
I think one of the things I want to emphasize here is this advocacy piece, because too often foundations and friends groups don't know that they can advocate. They have the misconception that, it's lobbying, which indeed it is, but it's really just making the case for your library. And there are very clear guidelines on what you can and can't do. And so that a large part of it is just letting a library friends group or a foundation know that they really can advocate, and it's really a very critical process for their library.
And that advocacy comes from the private side, not from the libraries itself. So the other part is it's really helpful to do a development plan if the library has a strategic plan. And the reason for that, again, is defining what you're doing development for. If the library has defined its needs and future vision, both in terms of its needs but also a vision for the future, it's really a fundamental for creating where you want to go with development. That helps you identify the activities in the strategic plan that can help from the development side, but also helps you frame the activities that will end up in your development plan.
Okay. So what a development plan actually looks like is a strategic plan for a support organization. Same things are inherent or are usually found in any development plan as a lot of library strategic plan. We really encourage a library support organization, friends or foundation, to create a vision for what they would look like if they were a really robust fundraising organization for their library. Create goals within 3 years and actually make those goals really stretch the foundation or the friends organization. Discuss the barriers and the resources. If a foundation believes that it can't do individual giving because they don't have a database of people who make gifts to the library, then talk about how you can build that list. If you don't have a really fundraising board, talk about how you can develop a fundraising board, because without question, the most successful component of a library support organization is having a fundraising board. And getting those people on board for that is really critical. And what are the resources that they can tap in? How do you build a database? How do you get the right people, get PR people or marketing people on your board? So looking at what the resources are beyond the current group and the current resources. Then each development plan has strategies to support each of the goals. Generally, there's anywhere from 5 to 8 focus areas in a development plan. It could be anything from individual giving, major gifts, planned giving, special events, advocacy, public awareness. So there's strategies under each of those goals. And then a development plan has champions. Who's really responsible for getting the work done, or at least leading it? Whether it's a particular committee, an ad hoc committee, the board as a whole, whether it's someone on the library staff to work it out. So who's going to be the person that sort of leads this particular effort? And then looking at what the plan's priorities are for the first year to 18 months. What do you want to bite off some things that you can actually have some success on so that the development plan can gain some momentum.
Yeah. Reinforcing a little bit what Sue's saying is development work is really driven by people and networking.
Yeah.
And so part of the process of defining goals and strategies is really identifying those champions and identifying priorities that can be handled by your library that you have the people resources for. Yep. It takes money to make money, but it really takes people who are networked and able to go out into the community and make connections, whether that's for fundraising, advocacy, or PR. Living the development plan. It's really important. Plans need to be living documents, not just things that sit on a bookshelf. So it's important to really share your plan once it's developed with the critical stakeholders. That certainly should be your library board, lead library staff. It may be broader for your library staff depending on what your goals are. Certainly your friends and foundation boards need to be engaged, but also other critical elements in the community, your city council or county board if they're funders. You, depending on what your goals are, you may want to reach out into the community and talk to your Rotaries or Kiwanis. It really depends a little bit on what your plan is, but you need to really develop an idea of where you want to share the plan once it's created with critical stakeholders, both internally and externally.
And I think this whole idea of doing the development plan and sharing it is really important because it says that you're really taking this very seriously.
Right. Critical aspect of any plan is establishing a process to review and ensure progress. Part of the plan should be having some measurements, but you really want to look at the plan on a regular basis, and defining who's going to look at that and how they're going to ensure progress is a critical part of the planning process. We tend to like dashboards or having a review. In many cases for a development plan, your foundation board, if you have a foundation, would be looking at the plan on a regular basis and make sure that they're meeting benchmarks. And I think for a development plan, unlike a strategic plan, it's a little more flexible because it is largely an internal document, is really looking at it and evaluating and updating. So if you say your first year's goal is we're going to raise $10,000 this year and you raise 15, you might want to advance your goal for the next year. If you've only raised 8, you want to analyze why did you fall short of your goal and what are the reasons for that, and maybe look at your plan and come up with some alternative ways of addressing what your initial ideas were, and creating a new direction or creating some modification to your plan.
The most important outcome of this is that when you've completed a strategic planning process and you've completed a development planning process, you really have a comprehensive plan for how your library is going to continue to grow to serve your community. So we really thank you for what we hope has been an enjoyable and an informative webinar series. We encourage you to share the webinar series or urge your colleagues to listen to it. Again, this is a webinar series meant to be not just for library staff, but for your board of directors, for your friends, for your foundation. So we encourage you to watch all 3 of the webinars in the series. We also encourage you to visit our website, librarystrategiesconsulting.org. We have a Facebook page and a Twitter page. Through the website, we put out a series of blogs on everything from development planning to Friends and Foundation. And we update that blog, our newsletter series actually is what we call it, on a really regular basis. So feel free to go back and revisit it.
And to do a little ad that's very relevant to development planning is a few years ago we worked with the American Library Association to create a book called Beyond Book Sales, The Complete Guide to Raising Real Money for Your Library. And it's really a compendium of all the ways to raise more significant dollars beyond book sales. And we'd encourage you to look at that through the ALA. It really is a great resource both on the different kinds of fundraising, but also has many examples. We want to thank you for joining us for the webinar series, and we'll be doing more webinars in the future, but as Sue said, we also have a host of blogs and other resources on our website. We're constantly updating those. We're always happy to take phone calls if you have any questions about planning of any kind. Both Sue and I regularly talk to libraries across the country about where they're going and offer some free advice. Of course, we love to be working directly with your library, but we're here to help you make your library more successful.
Thanks for joining us.